Hey folks, Brendan here from Bluelight. Now, if you've got your final interview coming up for the police recruitment process, or actually this could be the sort of question that's asked in a specialist interview board for someone who's already in the police, or even someone who's going for the rank of PC to sergeant. Sergeant above, I'd expect you to know how to manage these things anyway. But it's a popular question that's cropping up in forces around the country. It's a forward-facing one, and it goes like this. You're a police officer and you're part of a WhatsApp group that is managed for and on behalf of your team. One of the team members makes some comments which essentially are racist slurs. How are you going to manage this situation? So I could add to that and possibly put the sort of racist slur in it, just to make it a little bit more realistic. Let's use one from a storyline from Coronation Street recently. Not that I watch Coronation Street a lot, but as to channel surfing when I was in a hotel before I ran a seminar for Sergeant to Inspector candidates for Warwickshire Constabulary recently, and there it was, Coronation Street. And there was an interesting little storyline there about someone saying something about referring to a Pakistani individual as, "You lot are all the same, you always gang up with each other." So it's a comment like that, referring to people from a certain background as all the same, you always do, they do, your sort. It's that sort of, those sort of comments. That's the sort of comments that were in the WhatsApp group. These are the racist slurs. So I'm going to talk to you about 10 things that we covered in this one-to-one coaching session that I did today, where we went through this answer. I've got to say, the answer to start with wasn't very good, but once we built upon it and drew the detail out, it became an awesome answer. So the individual concerned, they knew what the detail was, they just weren't sharing it. They didn't know how to structure their answer, and that's what I specialize in, is helping you to be able to structure your answer with the sort of detail that's authentic, it's emotional, it's got all the necessary elements in it in order to tick all the boxes. We don't do using phrases from the CVF, we don't do buzzwords, we don't do vague cliches. We do realistic answers that are going to tick all the boxes, especially for the final interview. Because the person that you're up in front of on the final interview is likely to be a serving officer, someone like me. I'm not a serving officer anymore, but I've done those interviews. And the one thing I couldn't stand is when people start using phrases from the competency framework and trying to BS me with cliches and vague statements. It used to drive me nuts. What I want is detail, and so it's the detail you're going to get here. And how can I be so assured that I know what that level of detail is that they're looking for? Well, listen, I've been doing this now for 26 years. I've been in the police sector for 37 years, 28 of those years as a serving police officer. But for the past 26 years, I've been helping to support people on promotion boards, specialist interviews. And in the past 10 years, I've helped well over 12,000 people to succeed in the police promotion process through one-to-ones, webinars, seminars, online courses, you name it. I've helped people to get through that process in every stage of the police recruitment process, and I've helped hundreds of people get promoted. So I know what I'm talking about. So here we go. 10 things that were covered today. First of all, we're going to start structuring our answer with the why. Why is it so important that we deal with this? Why is it so important that we challenge this behavior? We can talk here about not just because the Code of Ethics requires it, not just because it's part of the CVF. The reality is, if this isn't dealt with, this is something which will grow and it will get worse. And the individual who's using that kind of language will keep thinking that, yeah, I'm not being challenged, so it must be okay. And then other people witness it and think, well, no one challenged this individual, so it must be okay. And suddenly this toxic culture starts to emerge. And then we can start thinking about the impact on people outside of the police service. There's other sort of impact things to think about as well, but I cover those in the webinars in a lot more detail. But the first part of any forward-facing question is, why is this behavior that you're being asked about so important? So next, Number 2, my client talked about how they would challenge this immediately. Yeah, how? Was my question after in the debrief. How would you do that? And so we formulated a how, a really specific how you would go about doing this. Number 3, I would speak to the person. That was the initial part of the answer. I'd speak to the person concerned and find out what was behind their comments. We need to do more than that. That's what you did, but how would you do that? How would you discover what's behind those comments? And so we looked at the sort of open questions you'd use, looking at the open question you'd use to start the process off, what you'd do before that in terms of confronting the individual, and then what sort of questions you would ask to get as much information as possible as to what was behind that statement. Number 4, how would you deal with the replies? Because I've been in these sort of situations and I know what they're like. I know people will try and deflect things with, can't you take a joke? It's just a bit of banter. Or you're not at training school now. Yeah, I've heard it all before. How would you deal with those comments? Because those are the sort of comments that are going to crop up, and you can head those comments off at the pass by including them in your answer. Because if you don't, the interviewer at the very end might say, so how do you manage this sort of comment? You mentioned before you'd confront the individual. What if they reply with, oh, can't you take a bit of banter? Or, oh, it's just a joke. Or, well, you know, they do, don't they? It's just true, it's a fact. Or, no, you're not at training school now. Come on, this is the real world. Chill out. How are you going to manage those sort of comments? And so we looked at how to deal with those replies. That's number 4. Where's number 5? Number 5. Be careful about using vague statements in your answers. So today we had things like, and all that, I guess so, unfortunately I'd have to. So these are sort of vague statements, and all that. What does that mean? I know a lot of people use phrases like that. It's the equivalent of an etc., but you can't use an etc. in your answers on a police interview, because they'll want to know, well, what do you mean by and all that? What do you mean by I guess I would do? You either do or don't do. You don't guess you do something or probably do something. And explaining something to the perpetrator, well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to. Well, why is it unfortunate? Who's it unfortunate for? Never apologise. Never seem like you're apologetic for taking action and doing the right thing. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to. Never apologise. Never make it seem like you're apologising, because it's putting you in a position of weakness almost. The perpetrator could use that as a lever. No, we don't. We tell them exactly what we're going to do and why. So that was what number was that? Can't remember now. Was that number 5? That was number 5, wasn't it? Number 6. Where's number 6? Right. Don't fall into the trap of actually stereotyping yourself. So my client today said that they were going to message him, referring to the sergeant. And the question I asked later was, where did I say at any point in the question that your sergeant was a him? So what they're doing there is they're presuming that sergeants are hims, and actually this individual had a sergeant in mind that they know. And they said, well, I was thinking that it's actually Sergeant such and such a person who I know personally. It's a family friend. So I was imagining that individual who I was reporting things to. But the College of Policing have got a phrase for it. It's called gender exclusionary language. It's like referring to all nurses as she, or all of the women who work as nurses. Or I've even heard it in Houses of Parliament, MPs talking about our brave policemen. It's gender exclusionary language, and like I said, the College of Policing have got that phrase for it. So just be careful you don't fall into the trap there, because that might raise an eyebrow and you might get asked questions about it. And we want to avoid any uncomfortable questions. Number 7, start thinking like a police officer. So if you've had that conversation, make notes after. Make notes. Make notes as soon as practicable after the incident, after the occasion, when you've asked the perpetrator of these racist language, racist slurs, the sort of questions, and make notes of the sort of answers. Otherwise, you've got nothing. You've just got one word against another. So that's just a practical thing that came out today. Number 8, what's the legislation? What's the policy behind all of this? It's the code of ethics. You need to know the code of ethics, this part inside and out, in terms of how you would manage misconduct. And there's 3 things that you must do. 3 things that you must do. You must challenge the behaviour. And like I said in our answer, we talked about how we'd challenge it, question it. Then we talked about how we'd question it as well, and then report it. So that leads on to number 9. Would you tell the individual that you're going to report this to your sergeant? I'll leave you with that conundrum. Would you tell them that you're going to report this behaviour to your sergeant? Or would you say, well, I think you're out of order, and then go behind the back and tell your sergeant? Or would you challenge them at all, or would you just go straight to the sergeant? Well, that'd be easier, wouldn't it? But it doesn't comply with the code of ethics, and the code of ethics is the law of this land. It's not just a good idea, it's a code of practice, it's legislation, it's not a would you could you please, it's an actual requirement. It's a requirement. So there's a lot more we went through in terms of impact on the rest of the team, what would happen if the sergeant didn't report it. We went into every angle that we possibly could in respect of delivering an awesome answer. It's a forward-facing question around misconduct, around inappropriate comments. It's a question that you're highly likely to get in any force that's focusing on values, and a lot of them are now, for good reason, because there's been scandal after scandal after scandal recently with issues like this, with WhatsApp groups. My advice, by the way, is steer clear of WhatsApp groups. Once you get into the job, steer clear of WhatsApp groups. They seem to be causing a huge amount of problems for officers, especially for the ones who are in the group, and this is something else we discussed. There's other officers in the group who did not report this behaviour. Have a little think about that. What's going to happen to them? And why? Why is it going to happen? Why is that thing going to happen to them? So we explored that as well. Number 10, the very last thing, the 10th thing that you need to talk about is what the impact is going to be of challenging that behaviour. And so this is our forward-facing model. There's 3 parts of it. Forward-facing question: why is this thing, the behaviour, is so important? How am I going to deal with it? How am I going to deal with it? In this case, it's one fluid thing that you're going to be talking about. But for things like promotion boards, they might ask, how would you engender a culture of performance on your team? How would you enable a culture where inclusivity is valued? These are sort of tough questions you get on promotion boards, in which case I'd look at maybe 2 or 3 things that you're going to do. Really specific things. Don't get into a shopping list, really specific things. And then ending with what the result is going to be. So what would the result be? And we talked about the double-edged sword here, because when people read, because this would go to misconduct, you know, racist language in a WhatsApp group, that would go to a misconduct. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And because it goes to a misconduct hearing, it's going to get reported on, because the press and the public, all of you, have access to misconduct hearings. You can actually go and attend them. Some of them are even streamed live, so you can watch them from anywhere in the world. I know North Yorkshire Police, where I live, the area where I live, they've done that in the past. So this is a tricky one to balance out here, because people will read these articles and it might reinforce their stereotype that the police are racist. But on the other hand, you're being transparent and accountable in respect of the misconduct process. And behind every misconduct, invariably, there are officers who have acted within the highest levels of integrity to call out behaviour which is unacceptable. And so in our answer, we might want to talk about how people might reinforce those stereotypes, but at the same time, it might also reinforce a fresh, new narrative that people will go, well, I thought they were racist, but actually, as a police force, they're trying to get rid of the racists. Look at this example here. This individual was sacked for the language they used. That's new, that's different. And so it could go either way. Myself, I believe that it's going to go the latter. It's going to help reinforce the narrative, this fresh narrative that the police actually do challenge inappropriate behaviour. They are prepared to stand up to misconduct, but just needs more of it. Needs more of it, because at the moment we keep seeing and keep hearing of examples coming through the press of officers or single officers carrying out acts of misconduct that are so heinous that you just read it and think, how did that even get to happen? How did it even get to that level without someone challenging it? You only have to read the Houghton report from Charing Cross Police Station from last year to know what I'm talking about. So there you go, folks. I could talk more about this, but it would last a lot longer than the 15 minutes that this 10 things is doing for you. I hope you found it really useful. If you want to find out more about how we go into these sort of answers in far more depth, then come and join the webinars. You check the links below to those webinars. Every week we practice questions like this, and you get access to recordings of all the previous webinars. So at the moment there's over 2 years worth of webinar recordings. They're all in a special Facebook group which you can only access if you are a member of the interview course plus webinars option. If you're a serving police officer, there's exactly the same. The Enforce Advancement group, check the links below. We practice every week, but we practice the tough promotion board and specialist interview questions that you're likely to get. And there's almost 2 years worth of recordings there. So plenty to get your teeth stuck into. That's on top of the online course, which you get immediate access to. So come and join us. I'd love to have you on board on those webinars, challenge you, push you, get you ready for your interview. I'll catch up with you soon, folks. Take care. Bye-bye for now.